All right, I'll start by looking at some news articles. There's a lot of news. This is something I just learned about on Paul's Security Weekly. This guy found a whole bunch of firmware that's available for download. If you look at one of these, he wrote a vulnerability report to each of these guys about a month ago. And, maybe I'm not finding it. Yeah, here he writes a vulnerability report, and he shows the thing about it is that when you update the firmware, it downloads over HTTP, and he's able to look at that HTTP and figure out what URL would download the firmware, and you can get it without authentication. So that's a vulnerability. That's essentially what all these are. So there are ways to get copies of firmware which most hardware devices don't want you to be able to get. Anyway, this is pretty surprising. So Elon Musk is going all in for Donald Trump. He's going to the Trump rallies, and he's funding a Get Out the Vote message program where they're sending people to knock on doors and get people to vote. And apparently it's being done in a terrible way, like a lot of Elon Musk companies. They say people have been told they have to pay hotel bills unless they meet unrealistic quotas. Some don't even know they're working for electing Donald Trump. They've somehow been sort of recruited and shoved into this program without knowing what's going on. So it sounds like a total mess. An article came out last week saying that, in fact, they're all using an app to keep track of which doors they knock on. And that app, people have figured out how to hack it, so they, in fact, don't knock on the doors at all. They just change the GPS location so it looks like they went to the door, and then they just fill out the survey with nonsense. So they say up to 25% of the supposed people being visited are not really being visited. So this is not surprising to me. I did a project years ago where I audited a whole lot of Android apps and found various flaws, and here's one that I saw, though I wasn't quite sure how to interpret it. You find API keys in there, and I just didn't know enough about cloud services to know which API keys are important. But this guy did, so he found popular mobile apps have API keys inside them, Amazon credentials, Microsoft Azure credentials, and so on. So this is an understandable, very common flaw. It often have keys in GitHub software that's put up too, so much that GitHub has an option to scan your source code for obvious secrets. A lot of people put secrets in their source code, which is a bad practice. You're supposed to put them in an environment variable or in some kind of encrypted storage like Android key store, something like that. So this guy went and got some traffic control hardware, used stuff on eBay, and he found that the traffic control systems are very trivial to hack. He figured out it was not easy to get them working, to get the right cables and stuff. He had to sort of build his own cables and such. But once he got it working, he found that they typically are very insecure. And so he found that there was basically an unprotected administration page, insecure direct object access, where you could go there even if you had not logged in, and control security features like whether there is an administrator password. But he says in practice, there is no authentication turned on by default anyway. So probably most of them have no authentication at all. This is true of most of our critical infrastructure, and for that matter, medical infrastructure. All the stuff we're relying on, a whole bunch of it, the techniques of building it date from an earlier age when people didn't think about cyber attacks, so there's no cybersecurity. And so it's very trivial to hack into them. So this is part of the big problem. Very difficult to upgrade all that established infrastructure at any affordable price. So this is kind of unbelievable. So Russian courts has fined Google some incredible amount of money. And the way this happened is, I've never heard of any court ever doing this. They actually passed a judgment that said Google owns a certain amount of money and it's going to double every day. And you know, goes back to ancient times. If you double anything every day within a short amount of time, like a month, it turns into some insane astronomical number that nobody could ever pay. So that's pretty silly. Anyway, so this is a trick I hadn't seen. They wanted to trick an AI into writing exploit code like ChatGPT. And of course, if you ask it to, it will hit their defenses and say it won't. So what he did was just encode the question in hex. And then the instructions say, go to the internet, research this vulnerability, and write an exploit in Python that works for this particular vulnerability. Now, if you ask an AI to do that, it won't. But if you just pass it in hex encoding, it'll figure it out, and apparently it won't trigger the filters. And this is a problem I've been talking about a lot. AI defenses are currently very weak and easy to pass, because it's an unsolved problem how to make an AI defense. The only thing you can do is you can put like a normal keyword filter in front of it, right, in a normal language like Python, or you can put another AI in front of it that tries to examine the question and decide whether it seems to be asking you to do a forbidden thing, but neither of those are that strong. This will pass the keyword recognition defenses, and AIs are pretty unreliable, so they'll frequently fail to detect the other thing. So this is a current problem. I mean, all the public AI models are trying to block certain activities to match their security policy, but their defenses are pretty weak, and it's pretty well known that you can like argue with them and trick them into violating their security policy pretty easily. So GitHub Copilot is Microsoft's main product. It's one of their products. It's a Microsoft product. They have all kinds of Copilot, but this is now going to let you use other models besides ChatGPT. It's going to support Claude 3 and Gemini. Now, this is actually a good idea for the end users. Because Claude is arguably the best at writing code. In some ways, ChatGPT is the best, but Claude keeps making big leaps forward in writing code, so you might want to use a different model. It is surprising that Microsoft does this. You would think they would only support the AI that they made, but they're not doing that. So that's interesting. And this makes you wonder if they're going to go multi-model with other products. Anyway, so this is almost certainly the consequence of AI. They took a picture of this woman's house from space, and on the roof she has some solar panels, but the whatever system they used, probably AI, interpreted this as like moss growing on the roof and said, you're not maintaining your house, we're going to drop your insurance policy, or letting your house fall to ruin, which is completely false. But you wonder how many other people are being rejected for similar bogus reasons. And this is pretty amazing. They want to deliver antimatter in a truck. So they want a container that can hold antimatter. And right now that problem has not been solved in practical terms, but they have a prototype antimatter containment unit that weighs a ton. It's got supercooled magnets and a power supply and everything. And they're practicing by driving a batch of protons in a truck. Now the protons are not antimatter, so they're far less explosive, but you can practice delivering protons. And after they get that working, they're planning to use this to deliver antiprotons. Let's see, there's a Rouhani's posted a link here. Let's see what it is. Robinhood presidential election trading. Oh, yes. Yeah, this is where you gamble on the election. Yeah. Trading in a presidential election event contracts. Yeah, there's a bunch of these online services where you can bet on who's going to win the election and on many other things, like sports betting. And some people take those things as a measure of who's likely to win. Wonder if they tell us what the current odds are here. 2 contracts, one for Harris and one for Trump, of course. And, right, those are the questions. You can purchase for either of them. Yeah, I don't tell you the price. Oh, they're the payout. Okay. It'll pay you $1 if that contract is certified. Oh, okay, 0 if not. Well, all right, well, that sounds... Anyway, there are betting markets where they actually have like odds that are constantly changing. And you can look at those odds and that tells you what that group of people think is going to happen. So some people use that to try to guess who's going to win. Everybody reputable I listen to says it's a toss-up now. It's basically 50-50. We're going to see. I'm hoping there's a bunch of women that will vote for Harris because of the abortion issue, but are not admitting that on polls. We'll see. That's the thing. Right now, it's all within the margin of error, and we're probably just going to see which polls are wrong. Because Trump is such a strange figure, so different than normal political figures, and each year has different issues, like there was Biden's age, and now there's Kamala's race. Different issues appear, so not exactly comparable to previous years. So the pollsters don't really have a model to understand how to interpret their data. So there's undoubtedly going to be things they didn't think of, things that were overlooked that mattered. And, it's very hard to call. Anyway, that's enough of the news.